Three, two, one, let's go. Oh, yes. Are you ready for this? My name is Donato and welcome back to my channel. Yes, we're here for a very special occasion because I have a very special guest, none other than Shane Benzie, author of The Lost Art of Running. Welcome to the show, Shane. Are you ready for this?
I'm more than ready. Yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. I mean, the pleasure is all mine because it's an absolute pleasure having someone like yourself, having read your book and actually seeing you here live is a great feeling for me because a lot of what you said in the book rings so true to me. But before we go into the details of who you are, what you do, and all that type of stuff, can you just explain how people can find you, Shane, on the social media, internet webs, and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So my company, or I'm the founder of Running Reborn. So you'd be able to find me on runningreborn.com. So I have a coaching platform and a website there.
Yeah.
Or the books are also a good way to find me, but I guess the internet is the easiest way. Yeah.
Yes, the internet. So it's runningform.com.
No, runningreborn.com.
Running Reborn. You see, because I was reading about running form here in the book. I have to say in here, let's say the lost art of running and running reborn. In terms of your, how did you come about? What is your background? Because in the book it talks about you being a movement guru and all that type. So give us a quick plot of history, because part of the book is about the journey, but it is quite a journey that I've been going through reading that. But if you can, for those who are watching, listening, can you give us a bit of background about yourself, how you got started in running and how this came about and so on?
Yeah. So I was an ultra runner, so running long distances and doing kind of really long distances and multi-day races and that kind of stuff, and loved the sport. But I was kind of experiencing two difficulties, I think, and I see these a lot with other runners. And those two difficulties were that I was getting injured a lot. I was constantly seemed to be going through this cycle of getting injured. And I just wasn't getting any better either. I wasn't getting any faster and just didn't seem to be getting any better at it. And that was kind of eroding the joy of my running. So I kind of really went on my own journey, really, to try and find a better way to run. I was pretty fit. I'd bought all the kit that could possibly be bought, and
You had all the gear.
I'd done all of the kind of peripheral stuff. And I just thought, well, really, it must be then the way that I'm moving. And I certainly didn't seem to move as beautifully as many other people that I could see. So I went on my own journey to try and learn to move better, to run better. But nothing really made sense to me. Everything seemed to be on treadmills, and it was all kind of based on biomechanics and stuff. I was kind of pretty confused with it all. But I really wanted to stay in the sport. So I actually decided, right, I'm going to become a running coach. The best way to learn how to run is to become a running coach.
Yeah.
So I went out to America to qualify as a running coach, and really enjoyed that. Came back, started coaching, but was coaching runners on a treadmill and had actually been coached to kind of more of a biomechanical view of the body. And it still didn't really make sense to me. And I think the first time a good runner came to me for some coaching and was moving really well, said to me, how do I move? How do I go faster? I thought, well, I'm kind of curious about that myself. Really, I wouldn't have said that, but I kind of probably blacked my way through the rest of the session and then just thought, do you know what? This is crazy because I don't know. And so I decided to down tools, and I thought, right, I'm just going to go and hang out with the best runners in the world, or where I thought the best runners in the world would be, and just see if I can understand what is good movement. I didn't even think of it as movement at the time. I just thought of it as good form, good technique, good gait. Now I would call it movement, but then I just called it form or technique. So the very first trip I did was out to East Africa in Ethiopia to start this journey on trying to find out what is a good runner. And 10 years later, I'm kind of still on that journey, to be honest with you.
So it's been 10 years, and then obviously you went to what is known as the town of runners in Bekoji in Ethiopia. I'd love to go there. I mean, I've been to Kenya. I've not been to, you went to Iten as well, which is the home of champions. I've seen many of the pictures. But when you were in Bekoji, when I was reading that book, just in your prologue at the start said you were running around the track and you were out of breath and exhausted, and these guys, it was just their warm-up. It was like an epiphany moment for you, thinking, here I am, super fit, super fast, and yet I can't keep up with these guys in their warm-up. It was that,
Yeah,
how did that make you feel?
yeah, it was. It was. So I'd got to Bekoji, and I'd actually gone to find a coach because I'd heard about the coach. It was actually on a CNN documentary, and I'd heard about this amazing coach out there called Coach Centeo, and he was living in a pretty small town, but had brought through some incredible runners. Tiranesh Debaba, Bekele,
Yeah.
many amazing runners had come from a really tiny area and had all been coached by this guy. And so I thought, right, I'm going to go and find him. And I didn't have an in. I just thought, I'm just going to go and find him. So I got to Bekoji and found him, and sort of managed to get into the training camp and spend time with him. And pretty much the first morning I was there, I sort of said, right, can I come training with you? And I was running with about 8 runners. And it was just incredible. I was running as fast as I ever could, and they were kind of just in this amazing relaxed movement and very, very fluid. And then just all of a sudden, with no real signal of anything, they just upped a gear and just left me. They were gone. And I just thought, wow, what is that? I don't know what that is, but I want it, whatever it is. I want to understand what it is. I ended up being there for about a month. And I spent a load of time there, incredible stuff, a lot of training in forests and all sort of amazing stuff. Didn't really know what I was seeing, came back from Bekoji and then kind of thought, right, I need to be a researcher as much as a coach. That's when I put my researcher's hat on and started to try and understand this kind of synergistic, connected, fluid, elastic movement that I was seeing. I wanted to understand what it was. And that was when I became a researcher as well.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the fluidity. For me, I call it, obviously, people know me as the poet with pace, but that's more to do with the poetry. But when I see people like Bekele, having met Bekele at the big half marathon, being a short lad. I say lad because everyone's younger than me, so I can say lad, even though they're in their late 30s, early 40s, whatever. But lad, and obviously when you've got the world record, you look at them run, it does look so like poetry in motion. In your book you talk about the foot placement, the cadence, the stride length, the breathing, the mind. They seem to just effortlessly glide. Was that sort of what pulled you in to think, I need to study this more and understand it more?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it looked at the time, it did look so effortless. That's kind of what you see, and I think we all see that in the runners. I've learned since that actually it's not effortless at all. And it looks as if they glide over the ground. Well, boy, they hit the ground with the impact, and they really decelerate as they hit the ground, and that's one of the things that creates the elasticity, throws them forward. So actually, once I got a better eye and an amazing technology, I could really start breaking this down. So they are trying really hard. Maybe not really hard as in the way we would think hard of trying hard with their muscles and putting a lot of effort into their actual movement. They're trying really hard. They're working really hard to keep this beautiful posture that they create, which then really engages this amazing elastic system, which helps the propulsion. So they're working hard to move beautifully, rather than just trying hard.
You say absolutely. I mean, when I say it looks up, it's a bit like the swan. What we see above the water, it looks all very calm and elegant, but then under the water they're frantically paddling. But you talk about the elasticity. I mean, I can almost jump straight into when you mention I've got to get my pronunciation right, because my English, whilst here I am in Middle Earth and in my hobbit hut, and obviously you're in one of the shires as well, Shane.
Absolutely.
So we can do Shane in the shires, in Royal Berkshire, and I'm in Royal Lickies. But it's fascia. Have I pronounced that correctly? Fascia. Fascia. And yesterday I was having a massage in preparation for my 10K time trial on Sunday, and I mentioned your book to her. And I mentioned about fascia, and obviously being a massage therapist, she told me a random fact that the fascia connects from this middle finger here all the way down to my toe, and it's all one. I mean, I could hold up the graphic, but can you explain to us the fascia and how important? And you talk about elasticity. what is that all about? You know, for those who listen who haven't heard the word fascia, elasticity, sometimes it's a bit of a, for me, I'll just go on gut feel, and it sounds, and to me it sounds like common sense that our bodies are all as one. But can you explain in a sort of, maybe whether it's a layman's terms is the right terms, or how fascia is important and elasticity?
Yeah, so fascia it's essentially a connective, elastic connective tissue that kind of really binds us together. You know, our muscles are sitting in something called myofascia, which is an elastic connective tissue that our muscles sit in. And actually our skeleton, you know, I think one of the big influences on our movement is our perception of our movement. Yeah. So when you're running, your movement is largely based on your perception of what's happening as you're running. And you might say, well, you know, I don't really have a perception, I just run. Well, we all do have a perception, even if it's a subliminal one. And our traditional kind of perception of our movement is one that's based on biomechanics, because that's the kind of curriculum that we grow up with. Yeah. And biomechanics, I think, really suggests to us that the skeleton is this kind of upright structure that almost supports itself. Because every time we see the skeleton, an image of the skeleton, it is just stood up in a very upright way, supporting itself. Yeah. It's always grinning, and it's always just kind of stood there looking at us. You know, if you look at if you go to the Natural History Museum, it's full of skeletons just stood in glass cases, very upright. You know, it looks like it could just walk out of a glass case and make a run for it. And if you look at a 6-year-old's biology book, the skeleton is stood there. A-level biology book, everything is based on the skeleton being a structure and everything else kind of hanging off of that almost. Yeah. But I don't really think it's like that. What I get really excited about is this concept called tensegrity. Concept of tensegrity, or biotensegrity for a human, is that the 206 bones you have that is your skeleton are all free flowing in a sea of elasticity. No bone in your body touches another bone. If it did, it would hurt. They're all essentially floating in this sea of elasticity. So I use this.
Oh, okay. Here's one we prepared earlier. I like that.
I'm never more than a meter away from it, ever.
I was going to open the page with that diagram, but no, it's better to have the real thing.
Okay, well, here is the real thing. So it's a child's toy, but it's a tensegrity model. And so it shows us the relationship between our skeleton and our fascial system, our elastic system. Yeah. So the fascial system is myofascia, tendons, ligaments, all are elastic. Okay. So this is a really good analogy for who you are. The wooden dowels are your bones, and the elastic stuff binding the whole thing together is your fascial system, your elastic system. Yeah. So as you can see, no wooden dowel touches another wooden dowel. As you move and run, your skeleton is free flowing in a sea of elasticity. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you get beautiful height in your body, that means you create a lot of recoil in your system. If you run around with your head down, there is no elasticity in that system at all. So I think that's the best way to buy into your elastic system, is to assume that everything is connected to everything. And the person you were working with in the sports massage was absolutely right. We have a superficial front line of fascia and a superficial back line, which means we have connective tissue runs consistently from our toes, actually right up into our skull. Yeah. Yeah. And if we stand, run, move beautifully tall, we load that elastic system, and that elastic system creates a beautiful sea of tension for our body, creates a lot of recoil, and also a lot of elastic propulsion. Yeah. Yeah. And what's really exciting about this stuff is the stuff that is holding you up right in front of me now. This system is never more than 7 months old. It's constantly re-architecting, rejuvenating itself. And has a life re-architecting period of 7 months. So if I bumped into you in June, you've got a brand new system.
Wow. So my question to you, I mean, there'll be a lot of people, myself included, the reason why I got this book is I know I can improve myself as a runner, because I'm a relative beginner. I've only been going 5 years. And so I regard myself as still a novice, irrespective of my level in the league tables or whatever people want to call it. But, you know, I'm still eager to learn. For someone who's looking to start looking at this, you mentioned about 7 months, and how random the internet can be, Shane, that literally just before I plugged in to do this interview, there was a YouTuber in America, and she said changing her running form is hard. Now, she's an elite athlete, and I know you've met, and we'll touch on later in the interview, other elite athletes you've come across. Is why is it hard for people to change, and what do they need to change? Do they need to go through the steps? Because I mentioned in your book is beautifully broken into the 3 sections of the journey, the foundation, and then the practical. People often want to jump straight into the practical and not look at the foundation. It's a bit like, I mean, I've done coaching as well, and people want to just do the sprints and the repeats and forget about the foundation building, in terms of building the base level fitness. What steps do people need to, apart from getting your book and having a good read and so on, and getting the right coach like yourselves, can people do some simple steps to help themselves, improve their form, improve their, not overnight, but over a period of weeks, months?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenge, if you go out tomorrow and attempt to change your movement, or change your gaze, or your technique, or your form, what you're actually doing, even though we may not appreciate it, what we're actually changing is our software. Yeah, we're rewriting our software, our very clever software. Our brain is actually what tells our not so clever hardware what to do. So muscle memory, I don't think it's really a thing. The muscles get strong at a task, but they don't really make decisions. The muscles do what the very, very clever software tells us to do. But I think we tend to go out, and if we try and change our movement, we think we're changing, we're creating muscle memory. And so we'll almost do drills to try and teach our muscles new tricks. Whereas actually, you could argue a drill would actually kind of contaminate your software, because running is a full body movement. And so if we go out and make new movements, if we work on the thought process that we're rewriting software, I think the challenge is much easier to take on. Much, much easier to take on. Now, the best thing that anybody can do, and it's really what I use some incredibly clever technology with my coaching and my research. So I put sensors on people that look at how much impact you create in newtons and g-forces of deceleration. And I use all sorts of clever technology. But the most powerful thing I use is video analysis. Right. And just about, certainly in the Western world, we all have a thing in our pocket that we can actually take out, and we can, listen, if I'm never more than a metre away from my 10 security toy, we're never more than 3 inches away from our phone.
Unfortunately, a lot of people, it's stuck there, isn't it?
Everybody has a device that they can video on now, pretty much. And so the best thing runners can do is buddy up. So you and I, if we buddied up and videoed each other running, we could immediately play that back. We can see whether we're heel striking, bending from the waist, crossing our arms. We can see what our head is doing. We can see what our posture is doing. That's incredibly enlightening and empowering. And yet we really don't do it. We spend a lot of time putting ourselves on social media. So we know how to use the camera and the video, but we just don't use it to watch ourselves move. And so a lot of my coaching now is based on actually, rather than just one-to-one coaching, I'm now trying to create this coaching platform that inspires people to buddy up, video each other, use the platform to understand how to move well. So read and look at films on how to move well, and then buddy up with somebody and video each other and help each other and critique each other. The biggest thing there are lots of things that make the Africans good at what they do: genetics, running out of poverty, altitude, growing up in bare feet, diet. There are lots of things, but the biggest thing of all, I think, is the power of the group. They're amazingly powerful as a group, and I think we tend to not interact as groups as much as we should. So buddying up together, videoing each other, showing each other how you run, and sharing that's an amazing way for elites and complete beginners to learn. You cannot be seeing yourself. Absolutely brilliant saying that. And a lot of that you talk about in the book is perception, and you've mentioned it also during this interview about perception. And for me, my perception is that I'm Eliud Kipchoge, and I'm just flying. And for the first time the other week, someone filmed me. I was doing a 5K TT with a couple of other runners, and how I looked like was more Forrest Gump. So
So my perception is Elliot Kipchoge, but actually is Forrest Gump. But at the end of the day, I know I can improve, which makes me feel good. I know I can improve, because obviously my form, as good as Forrest Gump was, getting across the world, is fictitious movies, sort of running like that doesn't.
But every runner on the planet can improve, and I've been very privileged to work with some amazing runners, and some, I think where analysis has got itself to is a running analysis is all about looking at what isn't good and changing what needs to be changed because it's not good. Good analysis, good coaching, I think, should also be about celebrating what's amazing. Because if somebody knows why they're good, then they can become even better at it. So some of the work I do in Africa with athletes is about trying to understand why they're amazing and then coming up with a way to give that back to them so that they understand why they're amazing. Then they might just be that little bit more amazing. And when you're looking at marginal gains, that can make the difference. So it's celebrating what's good as well as looking to change what needs to be changed. That means there isn't a runner on the planet who wouldn't benefit from seeing themselves move and having analysis and data and stuff given back to them, because even if it's telling them why they're fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. You mentioned you've worked with some great athletes. I want to touch on some of those because they sort of touched me. Whilst I don't do the same type of running, I'm certainly not ultra runner and done off road or whatever, but a couple of athletes that on your journey section, there was obviously Chamonix in France, which of the CCC, and Tom Evans, and in Yorkshire, England. Hello, everybody in Yorkshire. I often visit up there, but there was Nicky Spinks as well. Again, both these guys. Tom Evans has won the CCC, which anyone who does ultra running, hopefully I don't need to explain what the CCC is and the UTMB. Google it and you'll find out. But Tom Evans, one of the things that he mentioned, obviously in the book you say that he's there coming around the corner winning and he looks effortless and elegant. Can you explain your experience with him and how, what work you've done with him, and also Nicky Spinks and the jobs that they do? Because I think a lot of it you were saying, and you touched on it also with Uganda and what we call negative nurture, and there's like an epidemic of poor running. Is it the occupations that Tom and Nicky have helps them as being more elastic and more elegant, shall we say, or running with poise?
Yeah, so I think that there are many influences on our movement. I think the two biggest ones are our perception of movement, which we've already spoken about, and that we have this perception of biomechanics, and we need to try and maybe change that. And the other thing that really affects our movement is our everyday movement.
Yeah.
You run how you make a cup of tea. Yeah. How you spend your day will create the sea of tension in your body, like our model here. That's the sea of tension this model has. If that's you, that's created during the day. You then take that out into the run in the evening. Yeah. You don't make a cup of tea the way you run the way you make a cup of tea. Now, a lot of us are spending time. Hopefully you made that elegantly.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of us are spending time sat at desks in a slightly hunched over position, and especially with a lot of people working from home now, they're probably maybe put into even more difficult positions because they've got to kind of make do at home. So, and because your skeleton's just hanging out in that sea of tension really is very malleable and can really will be determined by how you spend your day. And so a lot of the work I do, as well as with athletes all around the world, I live with tribes and indigenous people, and the book covers it a little bit, but not as much. And the next book I'm working on covers it a lot more. So I go and live in the jungle with tribes and indigenous people, and in the deserts and Arctic and outer Mongolia, all around Africa, India, all over the world, hanging out with Sherpas in Nepal. Hanging out with communities and tribes and studying the way they move. They never run. They don't need to run. They wouldn't waste the energy, quite frankly, on running. But it's fascinating to see how they move, because they're not contaminated with biomechanics, and they also don't spend a lot of days sat in front of a computer. So if you do a job where you're not constantly just sat down or in one position, if you're doing a busy job where you're moving around a lot, That can make a massive, massive difference. And so Nikki Spinks is a perfect example of that. In fact, when I first went up to see Nikki, because she's a farmer, and I went up to see Nikki, and when I actually got there,
I think she was helping give birth to some cattle or something.
She wasn't helping; she was doing it. I mean, I went and knocked on the kitchen door.
She was delivering a calf or something. Yeah.
There was no answer, and so I looked around and I heard her shouting, saying,
"Oh,
I'll be with you
Shane,
in a minute.
give us a hand."
Yeah, exactly. So she just kind of delivers a calf and then jumps up and says, "Right, okay, what are we doing? Where are we going?" So yeah, I guess Nikki is cross-training the whole day because she's very busy and doing lots of manual work. So probably creating a good sea of tension and a strong sea of tension for her body when she wants to run. And I guess that's one advantage that elite athletes have over non-elites, is that maybe if they're full-time, then they don't, they can spend more time recovering and not necessarily sat at desks and stuff like that. Although the life of an elite athlete is changing, and a lot of them are sat doing that kind of stuff when they're not being elite athletes. So your everyday movement, it definitely feeds into your running. But I think that's quite exciting in a way, because you can affect that. I mean, I remember I worked with the GB 24-hour squad for the World Championships, and a lot of the stuff I would be discussing with them isn't necessarily about how they run, because they're pretty good runners, they're running for their country, but how they spend their day will determine how well they run on the track. And one of the biggest changes you can make as an athlete is to get yourself a standing desk. So if you are desk bound, many people are these days, that's the way of the world. If you could get yourself a standing desk, if you were stood at your desk with tripod feet, a lengthened spine, a neutral pelvis with an engaged core, eye line on the computer, working, breathing into the bottom third of your lungs, you're training for 9 hours, because your running is going to be an extension of that.
That is, do you know what, Shane? You can add this to your second book as well. When I ran my PB in Chicago, the 6 months before, I was working for a Swiss company, and it was a standing desk. So that little bit for me made the, I mean, there was lots of other things as well, but for me, that
you probably trained quite hard.
I did train. I did do a lot of training, but I literally improved. Admittedly, it was a bad effort at London, 6 months before, but I'd improved by 55 minutes. So literally changed. The company had brought in standing desks, which was a bit of everyone was outrageous. Oh, I don't want to be standing up, I need to sit down. But I thought, great, and you can adjust it and height and move about. But it's interesting. It's often the little things that make the big difference.
It's a game changer, and your body's re-architecting all the time. But a lot of it's based on weight bearing. Now, if you work, especially if you were working from home, you could potentially go 5 days without weight bearing. You could, you could get out of bed in the morning, walk down to the kitchen, sit down, work on the iPad, laptop all day, have something to eat, sit on the sofa, watch a movie, go back to bed, and you could do that for 5 days without literally being weight bearing. And that's not good. So, and I wouldn't chuck away your chair, because sometimes you just do need to sit. But there is no doubt, if you could bring standing into your everyday work for an athlete, that is fundamental, absolutely huge.
Yeah, and I guess that's why you sort of touched on it, where here in the Western world, I say the Western world, when you did go to Uganda, you had the two sides of the farmers having a certain way of living, and then those in the cities and in the offices had a different way, whilst they're both culturally the same country. I guess like here in the UK, Nikki Spinks being a farmer, and those of us who live in cities working office workers is again a different type of thing, I guess, Shane.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was spending time in Ethiopia and Kenya, seeing all these amazing runners, thinking, wow, but then I started to think, well, are these runners amazing because they've been coached to be amazing? Are they amazing because they're African, or what? What is it? And I started to get this nature nurture thing and started to see it. So I thought, right, I'll stay in Africa. And I went to Uganda and spent time in Entebbe and Kampala, looking at people and how they moved, that were office bound. And then 3 hours out into the countryside in Masaka, I spent time there, which is a kind of more of a farming community, and moved completely differently, because they spend their days completely differently. Well, I'll tell you what's really interesting as well. I spent quite a lot of time in India, researching and
Yeah.
and coaching now as well. I do a lot of coaching in India now as well, and India's developing that kind of different workforce now because it's the tech industries and
Correct.
a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
accounting and stuff out there. So actually, there's a lot of people now in the what they would call the metro cities, the big cities,
Yes.
who are now sat more and are doing what we're doing. We say the Western world, but actually it's changing all over the world.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it is a pandemic. Bad posture and not moving well is a pandemic thing. It's spreading and spreading
Yeah.
and spreading.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think the words you used is saying it was an epidemic of poor running was going on, which is quite ironic with what is going on right now. But
yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely.
with that,
But
go on.
I think we we're in a difficult. It's been a difficult year for a lot of people, hasn't it? A lot of people have found running in this time, though, without a doubt, and it's been quite interesting because a lot of people weren't really exercising. I think this is anecdotal what people are telling me.
Yeah.
But a lot of people just weren't exercising. But then when they were given an hour to actually go out and do it, they thought, well, actually, maybe I will then. And so so a lot of runners may have struggled because of it, but it's also brought a lot of people into running as well as a coping mechanism, because we know how good it is for our headspace and and our mental health as well as our physical health. So the more people that can do it, the better.
It's funny you mentioned India. Whilst I don't think it's mentioned in the book, I've been to India a number of times, and I do relate in a sort of side way, not to do with running, but more when I was over in India. I was seeing a lot of kids, and I was traveling with some Indian friends, and over there the main sport is cricket, and wherever I went there was kids with nothing on their feet, barely any clothes on, all playing cricket from like the age of 3. And it's no surprise that the Indians produce some of the best cricketers in the world because they've started young. And there was a similar analogy where you're saying, is it nature or nurture? And in the same way you have Iten, the town of champions, and Bekoji with the town. I understand in Jamaica, they produce the best sprinters in the world, and they're born believing that they're going to that. So do you think it's a genetic thing physically, or is it a psychological thing because they believe that they're in an area of champions and they believe that they're going to be champions, or is it a combination of the two, Shane?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two and a few things. I think, if everybody in East Africa, if everyone in Kenya grows up wanting to emulate Eliud Kipchoge, there's going to be a big pool of people to pick from that could end up at the pointy end. Genetics certainly makes a difference as well. Again, if you use Kenya as an example, the Keridin tribe, just about every successful Kenyan athlete in recent times can be traced back to
from that tribe.
So it is a genetic thing. But what it does bring up, and what I think is fascinating, and this is great news for anybody listening, is that I think we put a lot more emphasis on talent than we do practice. And I think having worked with over 3,000 runners now one-to-one, and goodness knows how many in groups, but certainly the one-to-ones are enlightening because you get to spend more time with them over a period of time. Good practice outweighs talent, I think. You get someone who's talented and practice is really hard, then you've got an amazing athlete.
Yes.
Talent alone isn't everything, and I've seen I work with some amazing runners who probably aren't the most talented in the world, but through practice and hard work are doing some incredible things. So I think that's really exciting for everybody. It isn't necessarily if you're not super talented, and a lot of people say, well, I'm not even a runner. With practice you can you genuinely can be amazing, and you can definitely fulfill your potential through practice. You don't have to be super talented, because not many people are.
I mean, Shane, you've obviously saw my live chat of 2 weeks ago. I've got to send you a virtual tenner for mentioning that, because what you've just said was verbatim, although I did just copy and paste it from a similar gentleman as yourself, but he's in America, and he talks about the three categories. I categorize it as the 3 pillars. So genetics has an influence, training and diet. So you can have the most talented person, but if they don't train hard, or eat the right foods, then they're not going to perform as good as someone who combines all three. So yeah, it's what you're saying, Shane. It echoes exactly with what other top researchers, top athletes have all been saying, that yeah, there's talent to a point. I guess a bit like having met Paula Radcliffe, everyone talks about Paula's twitch when she's running, and she didn't have good running form, but she obviously put the training and the work into it to achieve the world record. It's
absolutely. And you know what? With Paula Radcliffe's head, everyone talks about the head, moving as she runs. But one of the big things that I'm working with athletes and coaching and getting people the thought processes is that balance and symmetry beat power any day of the week.
Yeah.
So with that 10 symmetry model, if you get beautifully tall and put elastic into your body, engage your elastic system, and then it's all about getting balance and symmetry so that every movement creates recoil for the next movement.
Yeah.
So if Paula's head was moving from side to side, but it was doing it actually in a way that was actually synonymous. So every movement created recoil for the next one. So although it was moving, it was doing it in a very efficient way, because it wouldn't go 3 times to the left, once to the right, once forward, maybe 2 back, and then it did it in a very...
It was in rhythm. Yeah.
It was. So therefore, actually, the nuchal ligament and the elastic, the tissues and everything that's holding together got very used to that movement and created recoil for that next movement. So it might not have been quite as inefficient as the eye might think.
Yeah, I think it was what you've just said. It's her poetry in motion, whilst it might not look the same. And I've seen a few East African runners have a certain gait, but for them, they still look efficient for them. Does that make sense? So it works for them, but copying it, like a foot may flay, but it's that motion altogether. But I'm appreciating that in the book you mentioned about people often jump to, because the training and effort and so on can be a lot of hard work, and people tend to want to buy success. They want to buy the best shoes, they want to buy the best.
Yeah, I was one of those.
Yeah, they want to buy everything. And I think you had a quote that you knew almost everything about running, but next to nothing about how to actually run. But my question to you, and obviously we're in an Innovate top, Shane, Innovate produced some great shoes. There must be a balance between the understanding how to actually run, but also having the right footwear that because I always say it doesn't matter how many blogs, videos that you see of people doing shoe reviews, all you have to do is find a comfortable pair of shoes. Would you say that's right?
Yeah.
And how does Innovate help? Because obviously they're predominantly more ultra off-road type shoes.
Yeah, but they do shoes for all types of environments. Actually, so they do road shoes and stuff as well. So I do work with Innovate on projects, and the reason I really like working with them, because I think there's a lot of synergy in our work.
Yeah.
The way, so I think the human foot is an ingenious thing. Yeah. So the way I see the human foot is it's essentially the interface between you and the ground. Yep. Mm-hmm. So like any good interface, it's a kind of a conduit. So it has a lot of work to do. So and it creates stability. It maximizes the proprioception on the 250,000 nerve endings on the bottom of the foot. The dome effect of the foot dissipates impact. The plantar fascia creates elasticity. The tripod effect creates huge stability. It allows you to create deceleration, which creates elasticity. So all of the things we might try and create from a pair of trainers, actually our foot has in abundance. And there isn't a pair of trainers in the world that will get the foot landing correctly. You have to do that. But so what I think footwear should do is take the very, very clever, ingenious thing called the human foot, and allow that human foot to interact with the environment that it's running through. So if I'm trail running, I can't run around in bare feet. You can't do that. I need a pair of trainers that's going to help me grip to rock, move through mud, something that's going to help me move through that environment and interact with it, but not tell my foot what to do. And I think Innovate do that brilliantly. I think, but we are, I think a lot of us have, and I certainly did this. I absolutely did this. Went down the route of just assuming we can buy our way out of trouble with something super cushiony or something that's super springy. And if we believe that, then we're kind of just going to go onto autopilot and assume our work is done and not think about how the foot should
Yes,
land. And
yes.
I think that's such a shame, because the foot, it's ingenious. It's, you know, the 6 million years ago, we would have been quadrupeds on all four, pretty muscular, and
Yeah.
living in a relatively small area, like at the size of a few football pitches. And then through evolution, we did two things. We stood up tall and got very elastic, and we developed a very, very clever foot. That allowed us to cover much longer distances and be efficient, catch more food, get bigger brains, get a space program. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, the very clever foot and the ability to stand up tall and get elastic is a human's USP.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time trying to do everything with our muscles now that we gave away 6 million years ago. And with footwear and with our feet, we just wrap them in something and assume that will do the work for us. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a really powerful message. Learn about the foot, learn how to land the foot, learn how the foot should leave the ground, and then get yourself a pair of trainers that allows you to do that in the environment you want to do it in.
Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Shane, because as you've said, again, a lot of people tend to think, oh, I'll buy that shoe and then switch off about it, think, oh, job done, when really it's more about focusing on that.
10 years ago, I bought a pair of socks for £25. And £25 is a lot of money.
Were these the silver ones? Was this the silver?
Now, the silver lining in the socks
Yeah.
that was going to make me more bouncy. Oh my God, I was so excited when I got them. I thought it was going to save my left knee, and clearly it didn't. And that was almost the last straw. That was when I thought, right, I need to go on a journey. So listen, I'm the biggest culprit for doing it. That's why I now think we shouldn't do it, because I've been there. You know, I've been there.
If anybody wants to leave comments below from this video, is there anything that you've bought that you thought was going to make you faster, quicker, more nutrition efficient and all? I mean, and in fact, one of my previous guests, she was debunking a lot of the recovery myths about how certain products are supposed to help you recover. But we could talk forever and ever and ever here, Shane, and I appreciate your time so much being on here. But
no worries.
I mean, I so wanted to go on about, you know, with the University of Kent, and when you were getting started, obviously me being of Italian heritage, and Samuel Marcora was saying, you're talking the bullshit, Shane, what's going on here? Did you encounter a lot of this? People who are going to be new to your book or have a bit of reservation, or, you know, I would call it healthy skepticism as opposed to being cynics. What one thing would you like to close on to say to people out there that you think this is how to help and to work out? What one thing or things that you want to summarize to close on this? Because it isn't what I've read so far, and I'm not just saying this because you're my guest here and I just want to be polite to you, but I tend to be quite straight talking. I say how it is. It makes when I'm reading your book, to me, it just makes absolute common sense. I'm not a scientist. I'm an engineer by trade. But as an engineer, I understand the mechanics and all that. But just as a whole holistic thing, it all makes sense. But what one thing, how would you like to summarize your ethos? And I'm putting you on the spot here, Shane, because I've said this before. What would you say?
I think as a researcher, what I was really, really keen to do was to take the laboratory outside into the natural environment. So what we tend to do with science is try and squeeze the natural environment into a lab. And that makes sense because it doesn't rain in a lab, and you have a very controlled environment, which means you would think that the research would be better because it's in a controlled environment. That's easier to get it through ethics, and from a data set point of view, it's better. But if you're taking a runner who runs around on terra firma and then taking them into a lab and putting them on a treadmill, you're actually analyzing something that isn't real anyway. And so I've always been of the thought process that, you know, for me, science is about going out and looking at what's amazing and then coming back, finding people far cleverer than me to tell me what it was I saw. And then I come up with a way of then giving that to you so that you can go out and use that. So that's the way I look at science. And Samuel Makoro, you know, we've done stuff together for 7 years, and he would say to me, Shane, you know, I think, you know, potentially your research is bullshit because you're just going out and hanging out in the Amazon jungle And you know, where am I going to get a control group in the Amazon jungle? I'm lucky if I even get my sensors back off the people that I'm putting in. You know, so you can't do that.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, for me, the science is more valid. I think you need both. I think you need both. But what's really interesting now, and actually, if we hadn't gone through the 2 lockdowns, this research would have started. And I'm doing my research partner at the University of Kent. I've got some research through now where we can actually go into all of these environments with 20 sensors that go all over the body to give 3D models of movement, looking at all types of dynamics, but also mobile gases as well. So looking at people's CO2 and oxygen levels, all outside, running in the jungle, in Iten, in the Arctic, through Mongolia, up mountains, through sand, in snow. So now technology is catching up where I truly can take world-class laboratory type analysis and take it right out into extreme environments. I've always done that to a degree, but now it's up the ante on that. So I think you need both levels of science. You need the science where it's in a very controlled environment, and I think you also need to get out and have a look what's happening in the natural world, bring that back, and then try and get some thought processes on what it is you're seeing. I think both work well together.
Absolutely. That's absolutely fantastic, Shane. Thank you so much for your time. It's an absolute honor to have you on, because as I say, it's almost like a bit of a hero when I see someone who's wrote and spent so much time putting this together. At the moment, it's over a decade of your work has gone into this, and it still continues. But for those who are watching, there is a link below to where you can purchase this. I did mention I'll put the links to Shane's websites, etc., etc. I'm loving the journey, and I'm so looking forward to getting into the nitty-gritty of the foundation and the practical, so I can help my thing. And I'd love to hear from you guys who are watching, listening. If you've read the book, what you think so far, leave it in the comments below. But again, Shane, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll get you back on in weeks, months to come, and we'll talk more into the details, and maybe even get Samuela on, or Tom Evans, Nikki Sphinx as well. But next time I'm up in Yorkshire, I might look Nikki up and say, whilst I don't want to help delivering calves or whatever, but it'd be great to meet him. There's so much more we could talk about, Shane, but again, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate that, and we'll speak soon. So bye for now.
Good luck with your practice.
Thank you very much.